I never should have opened that email. Just one click, that's all it took to ruin everything. It came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, buried between spam and rejection letters. The subject line read: Victorian countryside home, immediate possession, priced to sell. I'd been searching for months. A quiet place to write. No neighbors. No noise. Just trees, time, and a second chance at finishing the novel I'd been running from. The listing felt wrong. 5 bedrooms. 10 acres. Less than half market value. The kind of deal that's too good to be real or safe. Still, something pulled me in. I called the number. A woman with a clipped, professional voice answered. The Maddox estate is a unique opportunity, she said. Then a pause. But I should tell you, it's being sold as is. The heirs want it off their hands quickly. Why? I asked. The last family member passed recently. The heirs live abroad. No interest in keeping it. She said it too smoothly. I ignored the instinct in my gut and scheduled the viewing for the next morning. The drive out was long, 2 hours outside the city, through winding roads and fog that clung to the treetops like a warning. Then the trees parted. And there it was. 3 stories of decaying Victorian grandeur, staring down at me like it had been waiting. The porch sagged under its own weight. The windows, too dark for the daylight, were still. Watching. The real estate agent, Margaret Keller, stood waiting. Silver hair in a tight bun. Thin smile. No umbrella, even in the drizzle. You're right on time, she said. And that's when the house shifted. Not in the wind. Not in the rain. It was something else. Like it had exhaled. Margaret didn't follow me to the door. She stayed rooted to the edge of the gravel, arms folded tightly against her chest, eyes on the porch but not the house. Almost like she didn't want to look it in the eye. Aren't you coming in? I asked. Her lips stretched into a too tight smile. I've shown it 3 times this week. I know the layout well enough to guide you from here, if you don't mind. Just a little under the weather. I'd rather stay in the fresh air. Odd. But I shrugged it off. Honestly, the idea of exploring it alone felt strangely right. Intimate. Like I was being let in on a secret. The moment I crossed the threshold, the house exhaled again. The smell hit me first. Old wood. Dust. And something else. Something sweet and rotting. Like fruit left too long in the sun. The foyer opened into a long hallway flanked by a sweeping staircase that spiraled into shadows. On one side, a decaying parlor, its windows stained with time. On the other, a dining room with a heavy oak table draped in yellowed cloth, as if the ghosts here still took their meals. Following Margaret's muffled instructions from outside, I moved from room to room. An ancient kitchen with an iron stove that looked more furnace than appliance. A sunroom with tall glass panes overlooking a tangle of wild roses and choking ivy. A library, bare but for empty shelves, and a leather chair turned toward a wall, like someone had left in a hurry, or was made to. The second floor had 5 bedrooms. Dust danced through shafts of grey light. In the master bedroom, a massive 4-poster bed loomed, untouched, like it had waited patiently for someone to return. It was the only piece not covered or removed. The third floor was quieter. Too quiet. Servants' quarters, maybe. Smaller rooms with slanted ceilings. One door led to the attic. I didn't open it. And yet, through all the dust, the decay, the silence, I felt it. Not fear. Not yet. A kind of belonging. I could see myself here. Writing again. Living again. Watching fog rise through the valley from one of those tall windows. When I stepped back outside, Margaret was mid-call but ended it the second she saw me. Well, she asked, voice taut. She still hadn't taken a step closer to the house. I'll take it, I said, surprising even myself. Her expression twitched, just for a second. Something between relief and warning? The Maddox heirs will be pleased, she said carefully. Very motivated sellers. In fact, if you can close quickly, say, within a week, they may accept below asking. Too fast. Too eager. Like they were desperate to cut all ties. But the house had already claimed me. I didn't ask more questions. I should have. The closing process moved at lightning speed. I never met the heirs. Everything was handled by distant voices over email and notarized documents in express envelopes. By the end of the week, the house was mine. And I was its. I bought a mansion for half its market value. But right before signing the deal, the lawyer shoved a non-disclosure agreement across the table and said, "Just, don't talk about anything you might find inside." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept checking his watch like he was waiting for something to explode. 2 weeks later, I was climbing into the attic with a flashlight, heart pounding, because I had just heard slow, deliberate footsteps above my bed, in a part of the house I had never entered. But let's rewind. The lawyer's name was Philip Jenkins. Nervous, twitchy, like he wanted the whole thing over with. I asked him about the property, just hoping for some cool backstory I could tell future guests. He fumbled with his papers, muttered something vague, and then changed the subject like I had asked about nuclear codes. Then, as I'm signing the final paperwork, he pulls out this NDA, thick, legal, ominous. "What's this?" I asked. "Standard procedure," he said, still avoiding eye contact. "The family values privacy. Just, don't share anything personal you find." It felt weird. It was weird. But I signed it anyway. The house was too good to pass up. 2 weeks later, I moved in. The first few days were peaceful. I was unpacking, arranging furniture, and setting up my writing desk in the old library, this huge, echoing room that felt like it belonged in a ghost story. The house had no internet. My phone barely worked. But that was the point, I'd come here to disconnect. And then came night 4. I was in bed, reading. The house was dead quiet. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not creaks. Not wind. Not mice. Footsteps. Above me. In the attic. Slow. Heavy. Measured. Crossing from one side of the ceiling to the other, and stopping. I froze. My book was still in my hand. I listened. My heart was slamming. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight. Climbed out of bed. The staircase to the 3rd floor was narrow and steep, designed so that servants could move invisibly. At the top, 2 tiny bedrooms. And a pull-down attic ladder. It was down. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even been up there. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. Just silence so thick it felt like it was waiting for me to say something else. I climbed the ladder. Slowly. Every step screamed. The attic was massive. Pitch black. Sloped ceilings. Tiny round windows at each end. My flashlight swept over dusty trunks, broken chairs, cobwebs. No people. No raccoons. No logical explanation. And then, in the far corner, a trunk. Not just any trunk. This one was chained shut. And scratched into the lid, barely visible under the dust, was my name. I hadn't told anyone I was buying the house. I hadn't even lived there a week. And someone, or something, had been waiting for me. What was inside that trunk changed everything. And suddenly, I knew, the Maddox family didn't just want to sell the house. They wanted to escape it. Forever. I was ready to leave the attic, but then my flashlight caught something. A door. I hadn't seen it before. It was half hidden behind a stack of old picture frames, and it didn't match anything else in the house. This one was different, newer wood, smoother finish, and a heavy rusted padlock holding it shut like it was trying to keep something in. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just made a mental note, come back. Open that door. The next morning, I needed air. The Maddox estate came with 10 acres. Most of it was overgrown wilderness, but I needed to see everything. The north and east sides were dense woods. South, wide, empty meadow. And to the west, a forgotten orchard, gnarled trees still bearing bitter, blackened fruit. But behind the house, that's where it got strange. There was a formal garden, or had been, now swallowed by vines and chaos. Stone paths twisted between decaying statues. Angels with broken faces. Saints with missing arms. And then, the northern edge of the woods. A gap. Like a wound in the tree line. It wasn't a trail, but it wasn't not one either. I followed it. 10 minutes in, I hit a clearing. Dead silent. No birds. No wind. And in the center, a stone crypt. A real one. Carved above the gate. Maddox, 1887. The family's private burial ground. And it wasn't on any map of the property. The gate was sealed shut with rusted iron bars, choking in ivy. I peered inside, but the darkness was thick, like it didn't want to let light in. I felt like I was being watched. I turned to leave. And nearly stepped on something buried in the leaves. I knelt. Brushed it clean. A silver pocket watch. It was ancient. Cold to the touch. Engraved. I flipped it open. Inside, one sentence. To M. Some debts can never be paid. Some secrets must remain buried. SWL. M. A Maddox? Maybe. But who was SWL? And what secret were they willing to bury with their family? I raced back to the house. I needed to know what was behind that locked attic door. No more waiting. I grabbed bolt cutters from the shed, climbed to the attic, and faced that door again. One snap, metal screamed and gave way. The door creaked open. And behind it, a room full of secrets. Not a bedroom. Not storage. A vault. The walls were lined with shelves. Every inch packed with leather-bound journals, in perfect order. Labeled. Dated. One after the other. From 1887, all the way to 1972. I reached for the oldest one. And in that moment, I realized. This house didn't just have a dark past. It had been documenting it. Every single year. What I found in those journals shattered everything I thought I knew about the Maddox family. And it all started with that pocket watch, and the name SWL. What did they hide? Who was buried out there without a name? And why did they want me here? You're not going to believe what's inside the first entry. I grabbed the first journal. 1887, the beginning. The paper was delicate, like it might dissolve in my hands. But the ink? Still dark, still alive. The handwriting was flawless, like someone had just written it yesterday. It belonged to Edmund Maddox, the man who built this house. And what started as a love letter to a perfect life, quickly unraveled into a horror story. Edmund had built this mansion for his wife Lillian and their newborn son Thomas. He was rich, coal, railroads, real empire builder stuff. His early entries were full of optimism. Pride. Passion. But then, something shifted. Suddenly, the entries grew short. Paranoid. Vague references to the arrangement and our obligation. He stopped talking about success. Stopped talking about joy. And started talking about disturbances. Lillian's health collapsed. The tone became desperate. And then, on December 21, 1887, just 8 words. It is done. God forgive us. I froze. That's not the kind of line you forget. I reached for the next journal, 1888, but before I could even open it. Crash. The sound of breaking glass exploded from downstairs. I dropped the book and ran. Heart pounding. Kitchen lights off. One cabinet door swinging open, a shattered dish on the floor. But that wasn't the weird part. On the clean tile floor. A muddy footprint. Small. Like a child's. But I live alone. There are no children. No visitors. No one. I searched everything. Room by room. Closet by closet. Nothing. No broken window. No forced entry. No trail of prints. Just that one muddy mark, like someone stepped into my kitchen and vanished. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper. And then 3 a.m. Laughter. A child's laughter. Not inside. Outside. It was faint, but it was real. I jumped out of bed and raced to the window. Moonlight poured over the tangled garden and the forest beyond. At first, it was empty. Then, movement. A small figure. Darting just inside the tree line. I didn't think. I ran. Clothes on, flashlight in hand, sprinting out the door into the cold. Crickets. Leaves rustling. But otherwise, dead silence. I crept toward the trees, beam scanning left and right. Hello? I called out. Nothing. No voice. No rustle. No sign of life. And just as I turned to go back, my flashlight flickered. And then it landed on something. Something that stopped me cold. My flashlight flickered, and then locked onto something white, half sunken in the earth at the edge of the woods. I crept closer. It was a small wooden cross, barely 2 feet tall. Once painted white, now peeling, rotted by time. No name. No date. No explanation. Just silence. But then I saw another one. 20 feet away. Then another. I scanned the tree line, counting. 1, 2, 3. 7. 7 identical crosses in a crooked, decaying line, all facing the forest like they were trying to keep something out, or maybe keep something in. I felt a cold run through me, deeper than just fear. It was instinct. And I ran. Straight back to the house. Slammed the door. Locked every bolt. Whatever this was, it wasn't just creepy. It was deliberate. The next morning, I stormed the attic like it was a mission. I needed answers, and the journals were my only lead. And this time, they didn't disappoint. I poured through them like a man possessed. Decades of Maddox history unfolding before me, not as a family saga, but as a generational curse. Scattered between the pages were the same words. Repeated again and again like a mantra. The arrangement. Our obligation. The price we pay. Then, 1921. Thomas Maddox. Edmund's son. Father never spoke of the arrangement. But before he died, he made sure I understood. And just like that, the pattern locked into place. Every generation knew. Every generation paid. And every generation feared what would happen if they didn't. Then came 1943. William Maddox wrote. Langford contacted us today. The usual arrangement continues. But the price has increased. Even these things are not immune to inflation. Langford. SWL. The initials from the pocket watch. It all connected. And then, I hit the most disturbing entries of all, Richard Maddox, the last heir. The final one to ever live in the house. By the 1960s, Richard's writing was unhinged. The words jittered off the page. October 14, 1971. The payments are no longer sufficient. It wants more. Always more. I heard scratching at every window last night, even the attic. How is that possible? Then came a date that made my blood run cold. December 21, 1971. Anniversary of the original sin. 84 years. The boundary weakens. I've reinforced the crosses, but I don't think it's enough. The crosses. The ones I saw in the woods. They weren't graves. They were containment. And now, I knew for sure, something was trying to break out. Then the final entry. March 3, 1972. Langford's descendant called. They are washing their hands of it. Centuries of obligation, and they just walk away. Final payment enclosed. As if money was ever the real cost. And with that, the Langfords ended it. No more arrangement. No more protection. No more boundary. And no one had lived in the house since. Until me. April 17, 1972. The final journal entry. God help us all. No punctuation. No explanation. Just 4 chilling words. Then, silence. Nothing written after that day. And for 50 years, the house stood frozen in time. Empty. Watching. Waiting. According to the documents I'd signed, the ones Jenkins practically forced across the table with that NDA, the Maddox estate had passed from Richard to his daughter, then to her kids overseas. No one dared set foot in it. Until now. Until me. That night, the house erupted. Footsteps thundering up and down the stairs. Doors slamming. Opening. Slamming again. The floor creaked and screamed under pressure, but there was no one there. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A child crying. Not just sobbing, wailing. It echoed from every direction at once. A sound so raw, so broken, it made my stomach twist. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just sat there, in the flickering glow of a dying lamp, staring at the attic door like it might breathe. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed answers. Now. I drove into town, the kind of place that time forgets. Brick storefronts, old diners, and a statue of some Civil War general guarding the square like a ghost from another century. The library was small but majestic, a Carnegie relic, with stone steps and creaky wooden floors. I asked the librarian about the Maddox family. She froze. Eyes wide behind thick glasses. Oh my, you're living there? Alone? When I nodded, she looked like she wanted to grab my keys and drive me out herself. You need to speak to Dr. Harrison. She gestured across the square to a red brick building with green shutters. He's our town historian. Knows things. Dr. Harrison. White hair like Einstein after a lightning strike. Corduroy pants. Suspenders. Office stuffed with ancient books and relics like it hadn't been dusted since Prohibition. When I told him the address, his face dropped. The Maddox place. Didn't think anyone would ever move in again. He leaned forward. Sit down, son. You're going to want to hear this. And then came the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough to make me realize. I had just become part of a story that's been unfolding since before the Civil War. A story about money, power, and something ancient lurking in the shadows of a wealthy family's legacy. Dr. Harrison began to speak, slowly at first, and with every word, I felt my grip on reality slipping. Because what he told me was worse than any haunting. Worse than any curse. It was a deal. And the Maddox family? They weren't just keeping secrets. They were feeding something. Dr. Harrison's words echoed in my ears as I drove back through the twisting rural roads, his voice still lingering like smoke. 7 children. Buried in silence. Forgotten in daylight. But not in the dark. The sun was dipping low by the time I pulled into the long gravel drive. The house, bathed in orange light, somehow looked different. Like it was holding its breath. It wasn't just the shadows growing longer, the entire structure seemed heavier, as though it had aged in the few hours I was gone. The air thickened the moment I stepped out of the car, and as I reached the front steps, I saw it. A symbol. Faint but deliberate, carved just above the door frame, a perfect circle with a line cutting clean through the center. Worn down by time, but unmistakably intentional. I ran my fingers across the rough groove of it, the chill from the carving seeping into my skin. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew, deep in my gut, that it mattered. That it was a mark, a boundary, or a warning. Inside, the house was ice. Not just cold, unnatural. The kind of cold that doesn't touch your skin but sinks straight into your bones. I made a fire in the library, the flames crackling against the eerie silence. As the warmth pushed back the cold, I spread the journals and notes across the massive oak desk like puzzle pieces from different lifetimes. There was one thread that kept tugging at me. December 21, 1887. That same date, again and again. Edmund's final entry from that year. It is done. God forgive us. And then, nearly a century later, Richard Maddox had written. December 21, 1971. Anniversary of the original sin. 84 years. 84 years. Same day. Something had happened, something that chained this family, this house, to a cycle of fear, debt, and silence. I began flipping through the ledgers again, cross-referencing names, dates, phrases. Over and over, I found references to the arrangement, the obligation, the boundary, always tied to one name, Langford. Samuel Langford. The one with the initials SWL, etched in cold silver on the back of that pocket watch. Langford wasn't just their lawyer. He was the keeper of something older than law. A broker of sorts, managing a deal that didn't belong on paper. Somewhere in those dusty books, lit by flickering firelight, I found another cryptic entry, an invoice of sorts, tucked between pages of a later journal. Not currency, not gold, not property. It listed 7. Marked. Boundaries reinforced. See to the seal. Below that, in the margin, someone had scribbled. The cost is blood. The payment is silence. I leaned back in the old chair, its leather groaning beneath me, and stared into the fire. 7 children. 7 crosses. A family cursed by guilt, or by choice. And I had bought their house. Their legacy. Unknowingly walked into a story that wasn't finished. A bargain still being paid. And the next payment? December 21st. Was less than 3 months away. From the moment I read Richard Maddox's journal entry, December 21, 1971, anniversary of the original sin, I knew I had to uncover what happened on that exact date. I opened my laptop, hotspot to a barely functioning signal, and plunged into the black hole of 19th century news archives. Hours passed. My eyes were burning. Then finally, jackpot. A digitized copy of a newspaper from December 23, 1887. The headline hit me like a hammer, tragedy strikes. 7 children lost in mine collapse. December 21st, same date. The article was brutal. The Riley kids had been bringing their father dinner when the mine caved in. All 7 were buried alive. No bodies recovered. Recovery attempts abandoned. But then came the real gut punch, buried in a small paragraph at the bottom, whispers of unsafe mining conditions, cut corners, support beams left out to save money. The mine? Owned by none other than Edmund Maddox. And then, the line that flipped everything upside down, Edmund Maddox denied the allegations but offered to cover all funeral expenses and provide ongoing financial support to the Riley family. That was it. The beginning of the arrangement the journals kept mentioning. But here's what didn't make sense: why did the payments continue for over 80 years after the accident? And why did Richard write that money was never the real currency in this exchange? That night, the house turned colder than it had any right to. I had the fire going. The heat blasting. Still, I could see my breath. And the noises started early, footsteps pounding up and down the stairs, rapid, urgent. Then scratching. At the windows. The walls. Something, or someone, was trying to get in. Then came the voices. Children. Not playful. Not joyful. They were crying. Laughing. Whispering in fragments, never fully forming words. Around midnight, every light in the house shut off in unison. Boom. Darkness. Complete. I reached for my phone. Dead. It had been 100% charged. And that's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic thumping coming from the kitchen. Grabbing a candle from the library, I lit it with trembling hands and crept toward the sound. The kitchen was still. Empty. But the back door, wide open. Swinging slightly in the night breeze. I knew I had locked it. As I stepped forward to shut it, I saw them. 7 small figures. Motionless. Just standing at the edge of the woods. Barely visible in the dim candlelight. They weren't moving. Just staring. 7 crosses. 7 children. 7 decades of payment. And now, they were back. Watching. Waiting. And I had just reopened a door that was never meant to be unlocked. The moonlight revealed them, 7 motionless figures standing at the edge of the woods. Children, maybe, but not right. Their proportions were off. Their limbs too long. Too still. Too silent. One of them raised a hand. And beckoned. Instant terror. I slammed the door shut, twisted the lock, and sprinted through the house like it was on fire. Every door. Every window. Secured. Fortified. I was in full survival mode. Back in the library, I shoved wood into the fireplace like my life depended on it. Flames roared. It was the only light, the only warmth left in a house swallowed by cold and fear. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but sometime before dawn, I must have passed out. When I woke, sunlight. The house felt normal. Warm. The fire was dying, but the lights were back. Electricity humming. My phone? Fully charged. Had it all been a nightmare? No. Because the back door? Still ajar. And worse, on the kitchen floor, muddy footprints. 7 sets. Small. Child-sized. They led from the door, and formed a circle in the center of the room. A ritual. A message. A warning? I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag, got in my car, and didn't stop until I hit the town square. Checked into a bed and breakfast, just to catch my breath. But this wasn't over. I needed answers. And I knew exactly who to ask. Philip Jenkins. The attorney who sold me the house. We met at a coffee shop that afternoon. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Fidgeting. Nervous. And the second he sat down, he tried to shut me down. You signed an NDA, he whispered. You can't talk about anything found on the property. I lied. I'm not here to talk about documents, I said. I'm just experiencing things. Strange things. Maybe the Maddox heirs knew more. Maybe they'd seen the same shadows. No, he said instantly. They want nothing to do with that place. They were crystal clear. The sale is final. I pushed harder. What exactly are they trying to forget? His eyes flickered, panic. And just like that, he started packing up to leave. Fast. I had 1 shot left. As he turned away, I said it, calm, cold, precise. I know about the Riley children. I know what happened on December 21st. He froze. Mid-step. Everything went silent. I had just ripped open a secret that had been buried for 137 years. And now, there was no turning back. December 21st, 1887. I know about the arrangement with Samuel Langford. That's when everything changed. Jenkins froze. Mid-step. His face went pale, like I'd just spoken a curse out loud. Then, with the fear of someone who knew too much, he leaned in. His voice barely a whisper. Listen to me carefully. Leave that house. Sell it. Abandon it. Burn it to the ground. I don't care. Just don't spend another night there. The arrangement is broken. The boundary is failing. They can't be contained anymore. And just like that, he vanished, bolting from the coffee shop. I was left in total silence. That night, back at the bed and breakfast, I laid everything out. The 7 dead children. The Langford arrangement. The journal entries. The symbol on the door. The footprints in my kitchen. The locked attic. And now this, a boundary that was supposed to contain, what? And if it was failing, what exactly was coming out? I needed to go back. Just one more time. One last mission. The next morning, sunlight painted the property in gold. Birds chirped. Wind whispered through the trees. Everything looked normal. But I knew better. First stop, the crypt. This time, I came armed. Flashlight. Bolt cutters. Gloves. A crowbar. I wasn't taking any chances. The forest trail felt longer, heavier somehow, like the air itself was watching me. I reached the clearing. The crypt stood there, same as before. But the vibe? It was different. The stone looked darker. The trees quieter. Like the world was holding its breath. I cut the rusted chain. The gate groaned open with a sound like something waking up. Inside, stone walls, dust, cold silence. And then I saw it, the sarcophagus in the center, and along the walls. 7 smaller niches. Each marked with names. Dates. Michael Riley, 1875 to 1887. Sarah Riley, 1877 to 1887. James Riley, 1878 to 1887. William Riley, 1880 to 1887. Emma Riley, 1882 to 1887. Abigail Riley, 1884 to 1887. And then Thomas. But the flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed for just a second. And when it snapped back, Thomas Riley's niche was empty. And the stone slab was open. What happened next? You won't believe it. Stay tuned. Because this story is just getting started. And what lies beneath the Maddox house was never supposed to be found. The last name, Thomas Riley, 1886 to 1887. But hold on. The newspaper had said their bodies were never recovered from the mine collapse. So what the heck was buried here? I turned to the center of the chamber and saw it. A massive sarcophagus. No name. Just one date carved into the lid. December 21, 1887. But that wasn't the worst part. Etched into the stone was the same creepy symbol from the doorframe of my house. A circle with a line through it. I reached out to touch it. Instant regret. The stone was freezing cold. Way colder than it should have been on a sunny September day. I jumped back, and my foot hit something. A book. Small. Leather-bound. Placed right at the base of the sarcophagus like an offering. I opened it. The name on the first page, Samuel W. Langford. And what I read next changed everything. I sat on a fallen log outside the crypt and started reading. This wasn't like the Maddox journals. This was different. This was the truth. According to Samuel Langford, the mine collapse wasn't an accident. Not even close. Yes, Maddox ignored warnings, skipped safety protocols, and cut corners. But there was something darker going on. Langford claimed Maddox was digging in a section of land that local indigenous tribes had declared sacred, or cursed. And he didn't stop. Because underneath that earth, the miners broke into a natural cavern. It held ancient relics. Ceremonial remains. Artifacts that no one could explain. Then the strange things started. Whispers. Shadows. Unseen accidents. A sense of something watching. Most miners refused to go back in. So what did Maddox do? He hired new immigrants, the Riley family, who didn't know the land's history. Desperate for work, they said yes. The father and oldest son worked the day shifts. And the younger kids? They helped. They brought food. They were there that day. December 21, 1887. All 7 Riley children were in the mine. According to Langford's journal, the kids found something. Something that glowed. Something that shouldn't exist. And right after that, boom. The collapse. But they weren't crushed. They were trapped. Rescuers tried to reach them for 3 days. And during that time, they heard them. Not just crying, but singing. Speaking languages no one knew. Voices that echoed through the stone. Then came December 24th. And what happened next would change the Maddox legacy forever. Something crawled out of that mine. But it wasn't the Riley children. According to Langford, it wore their faces. But it wasn't them. And that's when Edmund Maddox did the unthinkable. Terrified. Guilt-ridden. Out of options. He made a pact. Not with a man. Not with a company. But with something far older. Something not human. Langford helped, because he knew the occult. He knew how to build a boundary. A containment zone. Right on the Maddox land. Here was the deal. These things, these entities, could remain on that land. But they could never cross the boundary. And in return, the Maddox family would stay safe. But the price? Rituals. Sacrifices. Offerings. And strict dates they could never miss. And the final line in Langford's journal, dated January 1, 1888, sent an actual chill down my spine. The barrier holds. But it is not perfect. They test it. They prod it. They remember who they were, but they are no longer children. What came out of that mine is ancient. And patient. They will wait a year. A decade. A century. Until the boundary breaks. Until the arrangement is forgotten. Then they will spread. I snapped the book shut. My hands were shaking. It sounded insane. Like the fever dream of a grieving man from a forgotten century. Except, I had seen them. 7 small figures in the moonlight. I'd heard them in my walls. I'd seen their muddy footprints in my kitchen. It wasn't just a story. And as I stood to leave the crypt, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small alcove hidden behind the sarcophagus. Inside. A stone bowl, dark and stained. Candles made of some translucent wax. And a knife with a bone-carved handle that made my skin crawl just looking at it. Ritual tools. This was real. I didn't touch anything. Just tucked Langford's journal under my arm. And ran. Back to the house. Back to find out what I was supposed to do. But as I stepped out of the forest, my heart stopped. The 7 crosses that once marked the edge of the woods. Gone. Not removed, obliterated. Torn apart like matchsticks. And worse. The symbol on my front door, the circle with the line. Scratched out. Deep gouges ripped through the wood, like something wanted it gone. I didn't hesitate. I ran inside. Bolted the door. Up the stairs. 2 steps at a time. Straight to the attic. To the locked room. Because if I didn't find answers now, whatever came out of that mine was coming for me. The attic was empty. The journals, gone. Shelves that had held decades of secrets were bare. All that remained was one single page on the floor. It was torn, jagged at the edge like it had been ripped out in a panic. On it, in the sharp, rushed handwriting of Richard Maddox, were the instructions for a ritual. A ritual meant to hold back something ancient. And the date it had to be performed? December 21st, winter solstice. Today was September 17th. That gave me 3 months to figure out how to rebuild a boundary that had kept something inhuman trapped for over 100 years. I didn't sleep in that house. I couldn't. I grabbed a bag, jumped in the car, and drove straight back to the bed and breakfast. The woman at the front desk saw the look on my face and didn't even ask questions. She handed me the key. I locked the door, sat on the floor, and opened the page like my life depended on it. Because it did. The ritual was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't just candles and chanting. It required herbs I'd never heard of, astronomical timing down to the minute, and words written in a language I couldn't even Google. I needed help. And fast. For the next week, I lived in two worlds. By day, I returned to the house, only in the daylight. And every time, something was different. The air was colder. The shadows longer. Twice, I found footprints in the dust. Once, a child's handprint on the glass. There were no children. By night, I researched. Occult forums. Ancient texts. Anything that could help. But I kept hitting dead ends, until I remembered Dr. Harrison. He'd mentioned the Langford family, Samuel Langford, the man who helped build the original boundary. His law firm had closed decades ago, but what if his family hadn't? I drove to the county records office, heart pounding. And there it was, Eliza Langford. Samuel's great-granddaughter. Still alive. Living just 30 miles away. The next morning, I got in the car and drove to Sunny Pines Retirement Community. It looked peaceful. Normal. But I wasn't there for peace. I was chasing the last thread holding this mystery together. I walked into the lobby and told the woman at the desk. I need to speak to Eliza Langford. It's about something her great-grandfather did in 1887. And just like that, the receptionist's face changed. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Fear. What happened next changed everything. I walked into the sunroom, heart pounding. There she was, Eliza Langford. 92 years old. Frail in body, but her eyes? Sharper than razors. She stared through the window like she could see something I couldn't, something waiting. And then she turned to me. Calm. Still. Watching. I introduced myself, said I was researching the Maddox family. Said I knew her family's law firm had worked with them. She didn't blink. She just asked. You're living in the house, aren't you? My blood froze. How did she know? Yes, I said. I just bought it. But, how could you possibly? She leaned in, her voice low. There's a shadow about you, a coolness. You're carrying that place with you. I realized in that moment, this wasn't just history. This was still alive. Still happening. I found Samuel Langford's journal, I told her. I know about the arrangement. The boundary. I know what happened to the Riley children. Her expression collapsed. Her face drained of color. She gripped her wheelchair like she was holding back a scream. You shouldn't speak of such things, she whispered. Names have power. Memories have power. I told her the truth. The boundary is failing. The 7 crosses? Torn apart. The symbol on the door? Scratched out. I found a page describing the ritual, I said. But I don't know how to do it. I need help. Her eyes closed, her shoulders trembling. We tried, she said. Generations of Langfords, fighting to hold the line. But every year it got harder. The price increased. What kind of payments? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be horrifying. She didn't hesitate. Blood. First drops. Then pints. Then, animals. Then they started asking for children. I felt sick. She looked away. They came to us in dreams, she said. Promised power. Showed us visions. And we believed them. Her voice cracked. I ended it. I shut down the firm. I broke the contract. I tried to destroy the Maddox legacy. But Richard? He ran. He couldn't let go. She looked at me now, not with fear, but with pity. "Miss Langford," I said, steadying my voice, "if I don't restore the boundary, what happens?" She answered without blinking. "They will spread. Slowly at first. A child here. A whisper there. But they will take more. And more." She paused. "And no one will believe you until it's too late." And just like that. This wasn't about saving a house anymore. This was about saving everyone. She leaned in, her voice just above a whisper. "They wear the children's faces, their forms, their voices. But they are not children." And then, chillingly, "They are hungry. And they've been waiting over a century." I asked her one thing. "How do I stop them?" There was a silence so heavy it felt like the room stopped breathing. Finally, she sighed. "There's a way. Not to destroy them, they are too far gone for that, but to contain them again. To restore the boundary." But then her eyes dropped. "The price?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I pushed forward. "Tell me. Please." And then she did something I'll never forget. Eliza Langford, 92 years old, reached into her cardigan and pulled out a tiny, rusted key. "Box 1887, she said. "First National Bank. This will open it." Her voice trembled. "Everything you need to know is in there." Then her gaze sharpened. "But once you start, there is no turning back. You'll be bound to that place. Forever." I took the key. I thanked her. I stood to leave. And then, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip? Steel. "They are not the Riley children," she hissed. "They died in 1887. What walks now wears their skin, but they are ancient. They lie. They beg. They cry. Don't believe them." The next morning, I walked into First National Bank with the key. The vault opened with a click like thunder. Inside? A small leather case. Inside the case? Fire ritual instructions handwritten by Samuel Langford. Dagger #a silver dagger covered in symbols I couldn't recognize. Cross #7 small silver crosses. And a vial of dark, thick liquid I didn't dare examine. According to the notes, the ritual had to be performed on December 21st. Midnight. Winter solstice. The exact anniversary of the mine collapse and the original pact. 7 crosses had to be buried at very specific locations on the property. The protective symbol on the doorframe had to be redrawn, perfectly. And the most terrifying part? The ritual demanded blood. Freely given. From someone bound to the land. That meant me. I had 3 months. My job started falling apart. I barely ate. Barely slept. I lived out of the bed and breakfast in town. Only visiting the house in daylight. But every time I returned, things were worse. Footprints, tiny footprints appeared in fresh dust. Toys I'd never seen showed up in different rooms. Repeat button items moved. Rearranged. Triangular ruler patterns forming on the floor. On the walls. On the ceiling. The thing in the house? It wasn't waiting anymore. It was testing me. Watching. Getting ready. And I was running out of time. Names began appearing, on fogged mirrors, on frosted windows. My name. Dates I didn't recognize. And fragments of the same twisted language from Langford's ritual instructions. As December 21st crept closer, the house went from haunted to hostile. One morning, every piece of furniture in the living room flipped upside down. Another time, every kitchen knife embedded in the wall, forming the exact circle with a line symbol from the ritual. But none of that compared to the voices. They whispered from the shadows. They knew my name. They begged for help. They wept like children. They screamed like ancient gods. Some sounded innocent. Others? made my ears bleed and my skull throb like it would burst. And then the night came. December 21st. I pulled into the driveway just before 11 p.m., snow falling in perfect silence. The house stood dead black. Not a single light. Not a single sound. This was it. In my bag. Old-fashioned key # the silver crosses. Dagger # the dagger. The vial of thick, herbal liquid. Scroll and Langford's handwritten ritual instructions, memorized, rehearsed, burned into my brain. I reached the front porch. Stopped. In the snow, fresh footprints. 7 sets. Tiny. Child-sized. They came from the woods, circled the house, and vanished back into the trees. Inside, it was ice cold, colder than outside. My breath froze in front of me. The walls creaked. But I didn't hesitate. In the front hallway, I laid out every item exactly how Langford described. Then I approached the door frame and began painting the symbol using the liquid from the vial. My phone lit up, 11:57. Time to begin. I stepped into the storm, snow whipping through the beam of my flashlight. One by one, I planted the silver crosses at each of the 7 exact coordinates surrounding the property. Each one felt like sealing a coffin. But as I placed the final cross, I heard a voice. A child's voice. "Why are you doing this?" I turned. There she was. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. Standing barefoot in the snow. Wearing an old, tattered dress. Her skin pale. Her eyes, bottomless. "You're trying to trap us again," she said. Her voice? Not angry. Just sad. "We've been trapped for so long. We just want to be free." But I remembered Eliza's words. They are not children. No matter what they say. No matter how they cry. And in that moment, I knew. This was the final test. And if I failed, they'd be free. I froze. Eliza's voice echoed in my head like a warning siren. They are not children. I locked eyes with the girl, barely holding my voice steady. I know what you are. You don't belong here. You need to be contained. Her face, twisted. A mask of innocence shredded in an instant, replaced by a writhing rage that didn't belong in anything human. Then, she smiled sweetly. Like a doll. "We were here long before the Maddox family, long before any of you. This land is ours." I didn't flinch. "Then stay on it. Stay within the boundary. That's the arrangement." She stepped closer. But the snow didn't touch her. It moved around her like the weather itself was afraid. "We could make a better arrangement." Her voice purred like honey laced with venom. "We could give you anything. Knowledge. Power. Wealth beyond imagining." I shook my head. "I've read the journals. I know how it works. The price always increases." Her smile evaporated. "Gone. Then we'll take what we want. Starting with you." She lunged. Faster than thought. But, bam. She hit an invisible wall. The silver cross behind me flared bright, hot and white like lightning caught in metal. She shrieked, an inhuman sound that cracked through the night like glass breaking in your soul. I ran. Back to the house. Slammed the door. Locked it. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. No room for error. I dropped to the floor, knelt before the ritual circle I'd prepared. My hands were shaking. My breath fogged in the freezing air. And then, the footsteps. Dozens of them. Circling the house. Scratching at the walls. Tiny fists pounding on the glass. They started calling my name. "Let us in. We're cold. We're scared." Then, the threats. "We'll take your skin. We'll wear your face." But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I kept reading the incantation. Stumbled once, corrected myself, kept going. The final step. Blood. Mine. At exactly midnight, I drew the dagger across my palm. 7 drops. Falling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Onto the center of the pattern. Then. Nothing. The scratching continued. The screaming grew louder. They were right outside. Then. Silence. The house held its breath. And then. A soft glow from the floor. The pattern pulsed with light. Spreading through the walls, the ceiling, outward. It lit up the entire house. And beyond. Through invisible veins buried in the land. The boundary was restored. Outside. A sound. Like 1,000 voices exhaling. Then a long, high-pitched wail that faded. 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 Until the night was still. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The ritual pattern? Gone. But the symbol on the door frame. It was glowing faintly. The house was quiet. The land was calm. But I knew something that day. They are not gone. Just contained. And I had become the new Maddox. Bound. Forever. To protect the boundary. Because if it ever breaks again, they won't ask to be let in. They'll come through. And nothing will stop them. The symbol on the doorframe remained clear and distinct. Outside, the snow had stopped. The silver crosses stood undisturbed along the property line. And at the edge of the woods, I saw them. 7 small figures. Standing perfectly still. Watching the house. That was 6 months ago. I still live here. I have to. The ritual bound me to this place. To this obligation. Just as it bound the Maddox family before me. I've learned to live with it. To accept my role as caretaker of the boundary. The entities, I still don't know what to call them, remain contained within their designated area. Most nights, I hear them singing strange, haunting melodies in no language I recognize. Sometimes, they whisper my name. Sometimes, they promise things. Other times, they threaten. I ignore them. I've found more journals. Hidden behind loose floorboards, inside hollow walls. Generations of Maddox entries. Fear, guilt, desperation, all scrawled in fading ink. I've learned the boundary must be renewed every year on the winter solstice. And that smaller rites must be performed on other, significant, dates. I keep meticulous records now. Add to the archive. The irony isn't lost on me. I came here seeking isolation. A quiet place to write. But now I'm chronicling a story I never meant to tell. A story of ancient entities. Of thin places between worlds. Of blood-bound contracts and silent watchers. And sometimes, I wonder what happens when I'm gone. Will I pass this on, like Richard Maddox did to me? Unknowingly? Or will the boundary eventually fail? Unraveling piece by piece. Until the things in the woods no longer need an invitation? For now, I keep the arrangement. I perform the rites. I mark the signs. I listen, and I endure. Because I've become part of something much older than myself. And much stranger. And on quiet nights, when the moon is full, I stand at my window. And watch. They dance at the tree line. The 7. Their movements, wrong. Too fluid. Too graceful. Too inhuman. They know I'm watching. Sometimes, they stop. And they turn toward the house. 7 pairs of eyes catch the moonlight. Silver. Cold. Unblinking. And I know. They are still waiting. Waiting for the day when the boundary finally breaks. Waiting for freedom.